In the morning, sunrise brought a new heat. It felt urgent and hostile. Goldfinch donned a white suit outside, thinking it both a practical and tasteful choice, given the pomp and circumstance of receiving their savior from sunlight. He had thought he looked like a vaguely sexual Colonel Sanders. Instead, it appeared nearly gray with sweat within minutes and stuck to him like a cheap hotel towel. Their half lens of the solar diffuser hung precariously from the television antenna on top of the station building, creating an analog of cockeyed resplendence to the mayor. A bedraggled capital D, it offered some shade, which the residents of Yuba eagerly placed themselves beneath. He had wanted to thank Autodialer Dennis for his contribution to the install job, but he was nowhere to be found since early this morning. Taking in the sight with everyone else was the delivery driver that brought the half lens. Also white-clad, his humble service uniform was somehow more professional-looking than Goldfinch's suit. He'd been on his phone ever since arriving, trying to get a hold of his partners that were supposed to have delivered the other two pieces. "No one's picking up," he told the mayor. "Weird. I'll put in an order with Central to fix this thing, but the demand has been understandably so crazy today, who knows when it'll actually happen." The townspeople proceeded in celebrating the erection of this barely adequate solution by picnicking outside, as if to continue the unbroken human tradition of thumbing their noses at nature. It was all potato salad and plaid blankets until one man shrieked frantically in the distance. It was Mark, and now his arm had come aflame. He had been seated closest to the edge of the shadow cast by the diffuser, and now waved his arm from side to side in panic. If not for Mark's burning flesh and arm hair, the picnickers would have smelled melting rubber as well. Goldfinch watched cars outside of the diffuser shade sink as the material from their tires fused to the hot asphalt. Further on, he could see the river begin to steam. He quietly acknowledged that he was witnessing the last of the ozone being worn away. His contemplating doom was interrupted by the sound of angry little shoes clattering in his direction. Sherry ran up to the mayor to shout in his face, "We need to move. The shade is moving. It's gonna be like a fucking sundial or something." Goldfinch nodded in fast, dumb assent. Their barely sustainable plan was already becoming unsustainable. Everyone lounging under the shade of the diffuser got up and confusedly followed the center of the dark disk that was projected onto the ground. Mark cradled his scorched arm and hobbled after the roving mob. They followed the shade until the sun went down. Having been parked almost directly underneath the diffuser, the delivery agent drove off after the pavement had cooled. Tens of less fortunate townspeople's bodies were strewn about the city square by afternoon, crisp and brittle as leaves. Just being outside of the diffuser shade was causing such intense heat stroke many just dropped where they were. The sun did the rest by turning them into jerky. That evening, Sheriff Harksel looked up through the hole burnt in his police station roof at the plaintive stars. So gentle with their secretive, undulating beauty that they seemed to apologize for the wrecking ball sun that preceded them. He considered the night sky as he thought. Given the premeditation that went into Jerry Craig's truck hijacking, the sheriff would be surprised if Marysville were satisfied with just one half of a solar diffuser lens. He chewed on his nails as he considered the ways in which their neighbors across the river could sabotage their vulnerable township now. Autodialer Dennis was still missing as well. It was entirely possible he'd been captured and held against his will in order to force him to work on the other half of the lens. Harksel rewrapped the flesh wound on his shoulder and set out to cross the river on foot under the cover of night. Autodialer Dennis came disappointingly onto the small of Jerry Craig's daughter's back. A very modest amount of pearlescent ooze issued from him, and then glistened in the same starlight Harksel was considering on the other side of the river. He and Dawn had been seeing each other in private for about 3 months now. Autodialer Dennis had been a traveling IT tech for schools, and met her in the senior computer lab. They managed to hit it off quite well in spite of the 15-year age difference. Now they both lay in the shadow of a rusted radio tower, their heads propped up on a blanket-covered control panel. Their fucking had become more daring lately, and Autodialer Dennis chalked it up to good old-fashioned existential panic. "This was almost our last day on Earth together," he told her. "But once I heard y'all had half a lens, too, I made sure to get it set up just right. Your half even has the control panel. You lucked out." It's broken. What good is a control panel even going to do us? She asked. Modest malice wove its way through the spaces between her words. She'd been agreeing to being less cautious with their meetups because she wanted to get caught and didn't know it yet. She hated this guy, and only after this experience would Dawn have the emotional vocabulary to recognize it. Well, you could still change the transparency level. If we get a rainy day, you could set it clear and get the right amount of light through. She grunted a, behind her unfocused eyes. Footsteps came into focus, crunching the bristly, dried grass. Jerry Craig approached from around a corner and saw pretty much everything. This Radio Shack reject, and his daughter with a wet spot on the back of her shirt that she just pulled up over her head. But above all, Jerry Craig thought the real reason he was here was to steal back the other half of the lens. Having been shot at more than a few times in his life, Autodialer Dennis rushed behind cover as soon as he saw Jerry Craig's hand bolt in and out of his pocket and point in his direction. The gun went off 3 times, and Autodialer Dennis watched the bullets punch 2 holes in the dusty ground like an old Western movie. The 3rd bullet caused a metallic clunk sound. The control panel wired to the lens absorbed the round. Because of the blankets piled up on it, only Autodialer Dennis heard where the shot had landed. Assuming the pause in the action was Jerry Craig reloading his weapon, Autodialer Dennis made a run for it. He scampered nude down a nearby hill in a state of falling and running on his knees as he unknowingly passed Sheriff Harksel, who was headed to Marysville himself to snoop. Unseen, the sheriff watched Autodialer Dennis desperately rush past him, his penis flapping like an apology banner. Harksel drew his weapon and looked up the hill from where Autodialer Dennis came. Shots followed Autodialer Dennis down the hill. He got hit once in the back and tumbled the rest of the way down to the river to be found floating face down once all was said and done. Things such as they were, Harksel couldn't shoot normally with his right shoulder injured, so he switched his gun to his left hand and took aim at the parts of Jerry Craig that were visible from the lower part of the hill. His shots were slow and deliberate, the gun kicking hard in his weaker hand. One of the sinister bullets slammed into Jerry Craig's chest, and he slumped to the ground, dying in a sitting position. His friends, hearing the gunshots, rushed to the area around the radio tower that held aloft the solar diffuser and shot in all directions, drowning out their manic fear shouts. In the face of odds unknown, Harksel retreated into the night. Sunrise wasn't far off, and he would have to wait until tomorrow night to fish Autodialer Dennis's corpse out of the river.